The Federated Farmers of New Zealand, and I recognise Nick Clark there. Come on up.
How you do? Take this out.
How are you, Nick?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks, Leanne.
You're welcome. I don't think I've seen you in my current role.
No. I missed seeing you on the aeroplane as well,
Yes.
coming back from Wellington.
I don't miss anyone in the aeroplane.
I bet.
I just don't miss going to Wellington. So.
Yeah, well, it was a horrible day yesterday. I was up yesterday. It was absolutely dreadful.
Right.
But,
They were far away.
Thank you. As the Mayor said, my name is Nick Clark. I'm Policy Manager at Federated Farmers based in the Federation's Christchurch office. I'm also a Christchurch city resident and a ratepayer here in Christchurch, albeit I'm not a rural ratepayer, which is what I'll be mainly speaking about today. I'm presenting on behalf of North Canterbury Federated Farmers, and I assume that the submission's been read. I won't recite it. I note that our submission was made prior to the Court of Mentha report, so that sort of overwhelmed, I think, a lot of the points that were made in the submission. Let me start by saying that Federated Farmers North Canterbury really appreciates the relationship it has with the Council and the work the Council does in the rural parts of the city, particularly on Banks Peninsula. I'd also like to say that the Federation supports strongly the efforts of the City Council to rebuild and recover from the earthquakes. It's a situation that's unprecedented and hugely complex, not to mention very costly. There's been much said in the last couple of weeks about the $534 million funding gap, which looks like it's going to get even bigger if the insurance issues aren't resolved. I think it's fair to say that we would agree with the range of options that have been put forward by Court of Mentha, and I know you'll be going through a very major process to respond to those issues. We believe the Council needs to pursue a mixture of these options, and dare I say it, that has to include consideration of sales of some of the substantial investment assets, and also, very importantly as well, making sure that the Council retains, the assets the Council does retain, perform better and provide better investment returns than the sort of the 3 to 4% that appear to be the case at the moment. Turning to rates, we note that the average rates increase will be around 6.5%, but the impact of revaluations and the increase in the rural differential means that the actual rates increases faced by individual ratepayers will vary considerably. With regard to the rural differential, the increase back to 0.75 after it was reduced to 0.67 last year is understood, and we do accept it. This acceptance is on the basis of assurances given to us by Council staff that there has been an easing in the earlier fluctuations of the general rate due to large variations in maintenance costs, particularly for sewerage, and that those fluctuations now are back to a sort of a more normal situation. The increased differential, and this makes things a little bit easier to stomach, I suppose, shouldn't result in large rates increases for farmers on Banks Peninsula due to their valuations generally going down since 2007. However, the increase in the differential will be tough on some farmers, especially those in the western and northern fringes of the city, which have had increases in their rating valuations, and some of them quite steep increases. The point we're making is that even when the averages don't look too bad, they can mask some big impacts at the individual level. And perhaps recognising this, we note the Council has what looks like, anyway, a helpful remissions policy where rates can be remitted where it is just and equitable to do so. And North Canterbury Federated Farmers, as you'll see in our submission, has suggested the Council should look into whether it should make available its remissions policy for ratepayers particularly badly affected by this one-off event, and maybe set some thresholds and policies as to how it could work. We also believe that fluctuating rates can be smoothed a little by greater use of uniform per property charges, and we note that over the past decade the UAGC has been steadily diminishing as a proportion of the total rates to just over 5% in 2014-15. Finally, and although not referred to in our submission, we're very supportive of Local Government New Zealand's recently announced project to reform local government funding. Federated Farmers has long pushed for reform to local government funding to reduce what we see as an over-reliance on property value rates, which are, in our view anyway, an archaic funding tool for modern local government. We hope that Council will be engaging in this project, as we believe it could help the Council in the medium to longer term anyway. I acknowledge and appreciate that tweaking the rating system and big picture long-term reform of local government funding are probably the last things on your minds at the moment as you tackle with the $534 million hole. But we do put these suggestions forward as what we would hope are seen as constructive solutions to problems that individual ratepayers may be facing. Thanks very much, and happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Questions? No? Gosh.
No.
Oh, wow. Well, but I did, what was I going to ask you? There was something that you raised. Yep, Pauline.
So you mentioned, thank you, selling off perhaps some assets. So did you have any idea which ones you would recommend or which ones you would not recommend?
Well, I don't have a mandate from the province to talk about, you've got to sell this or you've got to sell that. But I guess you need to look at those assets which are held for particular purposes and whether they're meeting those purposes. It does seem a little bit odd that you have about $1.8 billion in investment assets, and it would appear they only return about 3 to 4%. And that's, I believe that those sort of rates of return are not unusual. They've been even previous to the earthquake, they weren't returning a lot. And I guess one would have to wonder whether if the return on those investments can't be lifted, then maybe it should be considered that some of those assets could be sold off. I mean, there's also, and not necessarily saying you sell the whole of the assets off. It could be that perhaps a minority stake of some of those large companies, for example, the airport or the Orion or the port company, could be divested.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew?
One of the things that you identify in your submission is the need for roading improvements to State Highway 75 between Little River and Akaroa.
Yep.
Can you expand just a little bit more on what you feel needs to be done? What should we be focusing on there in our dealings with NZTA?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr Turner. The feedback I got from members on the peninsula was quite a lot of concern about the suitability of the road for some of the heavy traffic that has been using it, particularly with the cruise ships that have been now calling in Akaroa, for example, with the buses, but also the truck movements. Issues around some of the tight corners and the narrow road and overhanging vegetation on that road. So certainly we're very keen for the council, and we'd be very happy to join in that and discussing with NZTA what sort of options there are available to perhaps improve that road. I know it's a very windy, hilly, steep road. It's not an easy road to improve, but some of those sharp corners and the lack of space for vehicles to get past things like buses and trucks would be good to investigate those sorts of things.
That's good. No, well, thank you very much for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.